Hi, welcome to Mindset Social Author Series. I'm Dr. Doreen Downing. I'm host, and what we do here is to invite guests who happen to be on our platform, Mindset Social, who have written books. And because they're on our platform, we know that they have a value of mindfulness, whether it's at work or daily life. And actually, mindfulness isn't even categorized as work or daily life, it's just life, right? So today I get to interview Patty Purpur DeVries. Hi, Patty.
Hi, Doreen. So nice to be here with you again. Just love our conversations, always uplifting and just so forward moving. They're beautiful.
Oh, yeah, uplifting and forward moving. So, listeners, that's what you get to experience today. Stay with us to learn about Patty's book. I'm going to read a bio, though, first, just so you get a sense of who she is and what she's doing nowadays. And she's the Chief Experience Officer at Living Well USA. She's dedicated her life to guiding individuals and teams towards personal and professional transformation. With a background in psychology, a distinguished athletic career at Stanford, and decades of experience in wellness leadership, including at Stanford University, she masterfully integrates science, spirituality, and practical wisdom to help people align their thoughts, energy, and actions with their highest potential. I have to take a big breath. I know you and I love you. And to read that again feels like, oh, you are special.
Oh, you are special. So together we'll make some magic, which I just love.
And make the magic. Well, your book, that's what the topic is today. And I was thinking about the living well within. I was thinking about that phrase, living well, because there's that phrase, right? Living, like, what does it mean to live well? But then living well within means that, oh, well, I can live well from within. And then the third one was, oh, there's a living well within me.
Exactly.
Is that what you were thinking?
Yes, I believe we have an infinite well. For as long as we're alive, we have energy that we can tap into. And it just, I get emotional when I talk about my journey after over the last 5 years because it really was pulling the weeds on my hillside while I was pulling the weeds of self-doubt in my mind and the steps and the new paths. And I started the process in 2020 because I had back surgery and then I was sent home due to COVID. So I never received, proper physical therapy after surgery. What I did do was walk the property, and the more I walked the property, the more I wanted to walk more. And so the I kept slipping, and I had surgery, so I kept slipping down the hillside. And so I started with a few steps just to kind of keep me upright, and then a few more. And now it's over 500, and they traverse the whole hillside, um, all of which, any of the trails will get you to the well. And the living well is a spring that the water comes directly out of the mountain. It comes out of the side of the hill. We're at 2,000 elevation, and there's just water that is there. And so it's a reminder of what we have inside ourselves when we pay attention to our thoughts and lift our thoughts up in the most beautiful way. We have an infinite number of ways to look at any given situation. And there are ways to look at a situation that drain our energy. And there are ways to look at a situation that explode our energy in the possibility. And I choose to find those thoughts and those focus areas that move me forward in life.
So much of what you just said, I wanted to respond to, but I'm going to take the explode right now because people talk about possibility, but what you just did just made possibility even more powerful by saying explode into possibility. So that's one of my responses right away. But you mentioned this hillside, and for people who don't know you, you're in California, Northern California, in the mountains of Santa Cruz. So if people want to locate you, so you had this property. Did you know that this well was there in the first place?
I had seen, certainly when we bought the property, well, first I'll share that when I first started looking for properties, I found this one online and it looked like this enormous blank canvas. The
Mm.
rooms were all white, it was about the house and it was an enormous house for the price. And so I contacted a friend of mine. He was actually a client, and I asked him if he would show me this property. And he looked it up and he said, no, no, you don't want that property. And I said, well, I want to go see it. Would you just take me to see it? And he said, no, no, you're not going to want it. It's just right near the freeway and it's just mostly hillside. And I said, well, can somebody from your office take me to see it? And he said, no. So I came up to this property on my own. The gate was open. I knocked on the door. I think the owners were a little surprised to see me. And I just said, I'm really interested in your house. Might you show it to me? And I left there and I went and I found myself a real estate agent who would write up the contract with for me and then give me over half of her commission back because I just needed her to write the contract. I knew the property. I had done enough due diligence. And that was my nest egg to start the improvements that were needed. And it was about the house because it was such an sort of an ugly house. And yet I saw this potential. It wasn't until years later that I started really tuning into nature, tuning into the seasons, tuning into the impermanence of all things. And that's one of the most amazing shifts I've had is to realize that whether we love something or we despise something, it will change. And to give me that patience and that strength to understand that everything changes in life and that it's part of the natural rhythm of the universe.
Uh-huh. So what first drew you was this building, this structure, but and you didn't this is what's exciting is at the moment you didn't realize, and this is what you're talking about, possibility, stepping into whatever the now is opened up everything else for you eventually. So it was the recovery that seemed to take you into the land. Is that?
It was the recovery, but probably more than the recovery was the fact that because I didn't need to commute to Stanford, and that was at best 45 minutes a day in the morning and 45 in the evening. Before COVID, I went in every day. And so
Ah.
I now had an hour and a half or more every day that I had free time. And I needed to exercise. I wanted to exercise. I wanted to get outside. And so I just started exploring. And I had no, I mean, I obviously knew that there are redwoods down the hill somewhere. I didn't realize I had access to them.
Oh.
And it started my real love of nature. And I've always had it. I grew up in North Dakota. And of course, every summer, all I wanted to do was be outside because we lived in a very, very small house. It was an 800 square foot house that I grew up in. It had a basement, but the basement had my dad's gun shop in it. So it was 800 square feet upstairs that the four of us lived in for most of my early years. And so I loved being outside. I remember our neighbor's beautiful garden where I would imagine that I had a pet monkey and that we'd play in the in the garden. I mean, I loved being outside. I loved the little lilies of the valley. And at Stanford, even I would feed the pet squirrels, and I actually had a squirrel that would come into my third floor apartment on campus and sit on my bookshelf with my other stuffed animals. I have a picture of him sitting on my head. It's been sort of my way of life, but I had let it go. And to come back to it and to come back to that joy I feel is just a beautiful thing.
Ooh, yeah. This when you said slipping, when you first went out into the property and you started to experience that you wanted to be there, but the slipping was happening. And from there, it felt like that's where you went, oh, we need some steps, right? Were you in the beginning when you were out in the property, were you making your way to the well or were you just exploring?
I was mainly exploring. I remember years before, so I had known about the well, and I guess I didn't answer your earlier question. It was on the map because it's called a spring lot on the well, but it
Uh,
had this sort of outhouse thing over top of it. And the only times I'd ever looked into it, it was just a mucky brown, there was wood that had fallen in from the outhouse that was protecting
yeah.
it. It didn't look like anything. I didn't really understand what a spring lot was, except that I knew that the property below us had access to it. And so when COVID hit and I had that time, I started cleaning out that well. I started cleaning out to see what is a spring lot and what is it here for? And that's where it really began. And so the steps were almost secondary because I wanted to understand the well. And so there's a pipe that comes out of the well and it was dripping. And so the first time I came across it in 2020, I thought, that's interesting. Does it drip today or does it drip all the time? So I put this little round bowl, this little orange bowl underneath it, and it filled up. So the next day I put a bigger bowl and it filled up. And then I dug a little hole and put a garbage bag, like a plastic garbage bag, and it filled up. I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And so, a little while later, after a couple renditions, I went and bought myself about $200 worth of pool liner. And I dug and I dug and I dug so I could make a little watering hole for the animals. Because about that time, the fires were coming here in Northern California. And so we sort of expected that some wildlife would come needing things from the canyon because that was the Boulder Creek fires. And so I set out the camera to see if anything would come. And that was the year that I had the bobcat, the mountain lion, the deer, the owls, the red-shouldered hawks, these beautiful little yellow birds that I don't even remember. And it was just, it changed everything for me to start realizing that right under my nose, I had everything I need for just awe and wonder and peace. And it was just a beautiful beginning.
Everything you say has such a metaphor, right? That the whole idea of first curiosity. Ooh, what is a water lot? What is a well lot? What is it? And then to be able to just explore. So you have such an adventurous spirit that I think you bring to it. And then g- just the steps that you took to go further, deeper, deeper, deeper. So literally digging deep. And all of this, I'm glad we talked about specifically your property and how you found your way into it. And then the book came out of this. Let's talk about the book.
So the book is sort of become my love letter to us, our souls.
Uh,
Because I realized in the journey that impermanence that we have, I realize my impermanence. And yet, as I'm paying attention to what's happening in the world, and I see Elon Musk building these machines, and we're all going to have, these robots at some point, and yet every one of us is more majestic and divine than any computer is ever going to be, and they can only dream about creating a machine that's as incredible as we are. I mean, I just have to think about my nose and touching my nose, and I just have to think about communicating something to you in writing or on Zoom or whatever it is. And we're magical.
uh-huh.
We're absolutely magical in what we can do. And I believe we're evolving at a fairly rapid pace at this point for those of us who are starting to understand the energy, the impact that our thoughts have not only on our own well-being and our own energy levels, but how we impact others by how we show up in a room. We know people that show up in a room as a Tasmanian devil. We also know people that show up and don't say anything and they are angels. That energy is what I believe the new currency is for our world. And I believe more and more of us are going to be finding that currency of peace, that currency of self care. And
Mhm.
actually, self care is not the word I use anymore. I use energy care.
Uh-huh.
because it's about showing up our best every day. And when we care for our energy, when we care about the thoughts and how they impact our outlook on life, then we can show up as our best every day. I recently saw something, and it may have been on Facebook, and I wish I now would have written it down. And it talked about people with high IQs over 130, and the rate of depression and the rate of, adverse circumstances. And I am a full believer that it's because of our ability to overthink, to overanalyze, and to um, just shut ourselves down, because we have that energy in ourselves to either lift ourselves up or push our energy down. I mean, I could crater my energy in a moment by thinking some of the worst thoughts. And
Uh-huh.
I can lift myself up by saying, I'm just not there yet. And today is a new day.
Uh-huh. Well, even just what you said in terms of how you're such a beautiful writer, you said you could crater your energy,
Mm.
and then the exploding possibilities. So today, as I'm listening to you, I hear these poetic phrases that you use, your language, Patty. And I would say that I'm a reader of your work, and the what I want to tell listeners is that it's an experience. Reading you is not just something that's going into my head. It goes into something that you've just talked about is energy. I mean, yes, when we think about self-care, self is, well, what is self? Is it a personality? Is it, what is really self? We can get into that. But when you say energy, taking care of our, paying attention, taking care of our energy, I don't know, I'm kinesthetic, so it feels more doable for me. And your book is divided into chapters, and each one has this inspirational message quote in the beginning that feels like, oh, it helps me go through and your chapters are short, so it's just such a flowing kind of piece of work that helps us feel into more of who we are. And what you said about a love letter to our soul, I feel like your words take me closer to my soul.
That makes me happy. And that's what it was for. And so I had written a book back in 2011. It's called The Soft Side of Success. And it talked about, and I'm trying to even remember what I was referring to. And I talked about something called the S factor, but I never really stated what that was. And so now, all these years later, 14 years later, I sat with that for a while, actually, about a year ago. I started sitting with that and thought, well, I don't remember calling out this thing called the S factor. I never taught about the S factor. What the hell? And did I not even explain it? And now, these years later, I understand that it's our energy, it's our spirit, it's the energy that we allow to flow through us. And
Yes.
we all probably can identify a time when we were like just flowing, life was good, things were happening, and then somebody throws a wet rag of criticism on us and we tank. We literally just, our energy just dissipates. And I'm learning that it's a choice. It's a choice to accept those words, or it's a choice to say, wow, that's really interesting that you have that perspective. I don't need to take it on.
Uh-huh.
Your opinion of me is none of my business. And we've heard that before,
Right.
but
Uh-huh.
it gets easier to do when we understand our own beauty and miraculous nature.
Uh-huh.
Understand how valuable our energy is and how valuable our thoughts are, then we can begin to, I believe, heal ourselves and begin to see ourselves the way we were meant to be without overthinking. Instead, just the awe of daily living, like all the things that we can do that we take advantage of. I mean,
Uh,
take for granted, I meant to say.
yeah, you just inspire me with every single sentence that comes out of out of you around the miraculousness of being, and that's our energy. And when we think about nurturing the miracle or the miraculousness. I kind of like, I mean, miracle is a word, but the miraculousness feels like even more juicy, I guess, is the word. So we're coming to an end, and I would like to have you just take the moment to see what wants to come through today as we close our time together.
Mm, thank you for that. My message would simply be that each of us, and I will use that miraculousness, that each of us have this energy within us that we can tap into. That when when I decided to look inside for my value instead of focusing outside for my value, then the world came into focus for me, because it's about my energy. It's about how I show up for others. And when I show up my very best, I can lift others up. And to me, that's the beautiful world if I focus there.